Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different, but before I get into what we're going to be doing today, I'm going to just say real quick, sorry if my voice sounds a little weird. I'm getting over a cold or something that's been going on for the last few weeks. I've been coughing a lot, my nose has been really stuffy, and for a little while my throat really hurt and was really dry for about a week. It's been going on for like 2 weeks now, or a little under that at least. I'm still trying to get over it. I'm almost over it, I think, but not quite. And I think that my voice is just giving out a little bit because of all the coughing and everything that I've been doing. So I do apologize if my voice sounds a little bit weird. Hopefully it'll be okay. But I really wanted to get this video done. But today we're going to be doing a part of my albums of 2018 type of thing. I've recorded 2 things already for my top albums of 2018. I recorded it twice, ended up not agreeing with my list both times because this year had a lot of really good albums and it was kind of hard for me to rank them, I guess. So I'm gonna do something a little different this time around, because last year I did do an actual top 10 and originally I had a top 15, but it just didn't work out for me. So this year I'm doing something different. First of all, I'm gonna be having an actual video where I talk about albums, like a whole bunch of albums that came out this year that I really enjoyed. Talk about all of them. There's a good 25 or 30 albums that came out this year that I would like to talk about, at least to some extent, not necessarily super in-depth for all of them, but I'd like to mention them and talk about them a little bit. That's going to be a separate video from this one. This is going to be a different thing. I'm going to do that one probably a week after this one comes out, which hopefully this one gets out by next week in relation to when I'm recording this. Probably that one will come out the week after this one, so I'll be doing that. But this video is actually going to be something very different from that, just because I had this idea literally like an hour ago and I was like, oh, that'd be a cool thing to do. I don't really know what I'm gonna call this. I'm probably just gonna call it my albums of 2018 part 1 or something like that. But it's basically a whole bunch of different categories of things about music that came out this year, and I have 3 albums for each category. I have 10 categories, and it's kind of like an awards thing, kind of like that, where it's got like, you know, best, I'm just going to take a few from what I have here. It's got like best vocal performance, best lyrics, stuff like that. I just wanted to kind of do this because I thought it'd be an interesting kind of a video to do, I guess. So first things first, we've got best production. This is just generally how good the production work on the albums are, how enjoyable it is to listen to just from a sonic standpoint, as far as how it sounds and all that, not necessarily basing it on the albums that I think have the best music or the best musicianship or composition or anything at all like that, just based on the albums that I think, in terms of production, were the best. So first one I've got here, which I do have these in a ranked order. They're not like, I don't know if they're like completely like best, second best, third best, but they are kind of in a ranked order, I guess. So first one I've got is The Alliance by Cipcore, which is definitely one of my favorite albums to come out this year. I just really enjoy the production on this album. Everything sounds really good. The vocals sound very nice, the guitars sound nice, the drums especially. Usually when I listen to an album, as far as the drums, I might say, they were performed well or whatever, but that's usually about it. But in terms of this album, the drums, the way they were mixed into the album and produced, the way they were done in this album, is just really well done, and it kind of makes them kind of jump out a little bit more. The production of the album really brings out the drums really nicely, and it really adds a lot to the album, and that in turn brings out the guitars a little bit and everything. And the production of this album overall is really, really fantastic. Next up I've got Dark Skies by Fit for a King. This album, like I said, I do think has pretty good production, and that can go for several different things in terms of just the overall sound quality of the songs, and in some other songs, the choices that were made with particular things, ways that certain instruments were done, different vocal effects, things like that. And I think it overall made the album generally a pretty enjoyable listen as far as that goes. And third one I've got here is Into Zero by Rise to Fall. It was overall a pretty good album, but I really enjoyed the production on here as well. Overall, it was really good, and I know I'm not really going too into detail on the production. I don't really know exactly how to go about talking about it, but the production on the album was pretty good, and it was an enjoyable album to listen to, and all of that. Next up, I've got Best Vocal Performance, which is kind of self-explanatory, which album had the best vocals, in my opinion. Not necessarily, like, the best vocalist, not like whose voice I prefer over another, but in terms of who I thought, as far as just the performance that they gave, which ones I thought were the best. So the first one here, again, Slipecore, The Alliance. In case you can't tell, I really enjoy this album a lot in many ways. I think the vocals in this album are really outstanding. The vocalist of the band, Dominic Christoph, is one of my favorite vocalists as well. And he does a really good job on this album, both with his kind of harsh vocals and the clean vocals, which do both appear throughout the album, and those are all done really well, and they fit the sound of the album very well and the sound of the band very well. Next, I've got I Loved You at Your Darkest by Behemoth. Nurgle, which is the vocalist for this band, is one of the best vocalists that I have heard. I would say that this could potentially be the best vocal performance on a Behemoth album, although I think the vocals on Behemoth's albums have always been very good. Of course, the harsh vocals are done pretty well, but then there's some clean singing done in some sections of the album, particularly on the song Bartzabel. That has almost some kind of choir-ish sounding vocals to it, even though it's not a choir or anything like that. It just kind of gives me that impression, I guess. And it sounds really good, and overall the vocals on the album are just really fantastic. And third one up for best vocal performance, I've got Firepower by Judas Priest. Judas Priest is a band that I've been kind of getting a little bit more into this year, along with a bunch of other classic bands, but this album overall was really good, but the vocals especially stood out to me. I really enjoyed the vocals on this album. I think Rob Halford is a fantastic vocalist, and this album, like I think I said in my review, he sounds just as good in this album as he has in any of their previous work, and even in some of their like really early classic albums that everybody knows. Overall, the vocals in this album were really solid, and I really enjoyed them a lot. Next up, I've got the best guitar performance. Again, this one is kind of self-explanatory. The albums that I think either just had the best performance overall on guitars, the best riffs, stuff like that. The albums that, to me, the guitars really stood out, much like with vocal performance, the ones where the vocals really stood out. So next up, after that, we've got the best drum performance, which again, kind of similarly, the best albums that had the best drumming. And first up, again, The Alliance by Slipecore. The production probably helps with this one, but I think the overall drum performance was really good. And I really enjoyed the drumming on this album. It was really, really fantastic and added a lot to the album, and not only added a lot to the album, but was also really good in and of itself. And then second one for best drum performance, I have The Misanthrope by Abysmal Torment. This is a really fantastic death metal album. I've listened to it a lot, and the drumming in the album is really, really good. Overall, I was just really impressed by the drumming in this album. Even though these guys aren't a very well-known band, the performances across the board were really good, but particularly, I think, in terms of the drumming. Next up, for best drum performance, I've got I Loved You at Your Darkest by Behemoth once again. This album is appearing quite often throughout this list. I think the drumming in this album was really good, a little different in style from Behemoth's past material as well. Same thing goes with really the entire album. It's a little bit different from anything they've done before, at least in some songs, but particularly in terms of the drumming. I really enjoyed the drum work on this album overall. Again, really good. It stands out very nicely. Next, I've got the best lyrics. Again, the albums that I think had the best lyrics, the ones that not necessarily I always related to the most, but the ones that I think were just well written and all of that. And once again, we have Behemoth, I Loved You at Your Darkest. I really enjoyed the lyrics on this album. It was one of the things that I really praised quite a bit when I reviewed it. Of course, the lyrics themselves are very well written, but also when you go and actually look at them and research into them a little bit, there's a whole bunch of little references to all these different things, because Behemoth is a very kind of religious focused band, I guess. More along the lines of being anti-religious, I guess, but they make a lot of references to different things, and it's very clear that, I'm pretty sure Nergal probably writes the lyrics for the band. It's quite clear that he is a very intelligent person and knows a lot about what he's talking about, and I just really appreciated that. And even though I don't necessarily agree with all the lyrics on this album, I did think they were incredibly well written. Next, I've got Holy Hell by Architects. This is, again, a really great album, but it also has some really great lyrics. I really enjoyed the lyrics on this album, and part of that is probably because they were well written, but it was also as kind of the process of grieving for their guitarist that they lost a few years ago to skin cancer. And the lyrics have a lot to do with those kinds of themes of death and grief and mortality, stuff like that. I just think overall they were really well written. And third, I've got Transients by Shilma Gognar, which is a really fantastic album, but I really enjoyed the lyrics on this one as well. Again, they're very well written, and it kind of reminds me of lyrics that bands like Insomnium would write, which might be why I enjoyed them so much, because I really enjoy Insomnium's lyrics. Yeah, just in terms of the way they were written, just not necessarily in terms of subject matter, just the way they were written was very similar to Insomnium, and I just really enjoyed the lyrics overall. Next up, I've got the albums that had the best singles. So this is not necessarily basing it on, the albums overall or anything, but the bands that I think had the best singles released for the albums. And this doesn't mean that I think that, the singles are better than the songs on other albums or anything like that, but just the singles in and of themselves, which bands released the best ones. So first up, again, I've got Architects with Holy Hell. I really enjoyed the singles on this album. I listened to them quite a lot. They are, in my opinion, the best songs on the album, with like Hereafter, Royal Beggars, and Doomsday. Those are some really fantastic songs, and in my opinion, the best songs on the album, or at least 3 of them. Yeah, the singles on the album overall are just really good. They were picked out very nicely. They did a really good job of kind of picking out songs that not only are really good, but also kind of give you a really good idea of what the album overall is about, because in terms of when the time leading up to when the album comes out, I think it's important for the singles to not only release songs that are good and will get people excited for the album, but also songs that give a good taste of what the album overall is going to be like. And I think they did a really good job with the singles for Holy Hell. So next up, I have, again, I promise this is the last time this album is going to show up, I Loved You at Your Darkest by Behemoth. 3 singles from this album, I believe, which were all really good, and I enjoyed them all quite a lot. And again, I think these singles did a really good job at kind of showing what the album was going to be. Not quite 100%, because I think 2 of the singles, which were Wolves of Siberia and God Equals Dog, were kind of, if you're a fan of Behemoth, this is pretty much what you would expect, although there were some kind of different elements to them in some places. But then, with the 3rd single, Bartzabel, was vastly different from anything Behemoth had done before. That one, I think, showed really well what Behemoth was kind of going for with this album, or at least what I think they were going for with this album, which was to do something a little bit different, kind of do something fresh and new that they hadn't really done before. I think the singles on this album, of course, were overall really good, but they also did a good job at showing, like, there's going to be, of course, some stuff for the really hardcore Behemoth fans that love everything the band has ever done, as well as, doing some new stuff. So I think that was really good as far as the singles were concerned. And finally, I've got Dark Skies by Fit for a King. The singles for this album I came back to quite often before the album's release and after the album's release. And I think that, again, this did a good job of kind of giving a taste of a whole bunch of different stuff from the album, although you could argue they released too many singles. It kind of was the same thing with Ember by Breaking Benjamin earlier in the year. They released 5 songs before the album came out, which in my opinion is too many. I think like 3 at most is a good number of singles to release, especially if it's an album like Ember and Dark Skies, where it's only 10 songs. But then if it's only 10 songs and you release 5 before the album comes out, you've heard half the album before the album even comes out, and that's really, I would prefer to save most of it for when the album actually releases. Singles, I think, were pretty good. Good variety between them. You had some very heavy kind of singles, some less heavy singles, some ones that are a little bit more different from anything that the band has really done before. You kind of get it all with these singles, and that's kind of what I appreciated the most about them. Next, I've got the albums that I think are the most unique or the most innovative. First one I've got is Back to Reality by Abstract Void. This one is more in the terms of the unique, and because it's kind of a mixture of black metal, kind of atmospheric black metal, and synthwave, which is an unusual combination, but it works really well, and I really enjoyed it. I wouldn't say it's one of my favorite albums of the year because I think it is kind of repetitive and all that different stuff, which I'll probably get into in the part 2 of my albums of the year. I just think it was a really interesting idea, very unique, really cool, and even though it's not one of my favorite albums of the year, I think at the very least I should give it props for that. Next, I've got Episode 2 by Galactic Empire. This is a really fantastic band, and really the concept of the band overall is quite unique, so they were kind of going to be on here by default. And that is doing instrumental kind of metal covers of Star Wars songs. And I really enjoyed this album, and it's of course pretty unique to everything else that came out this year, I think. So that's pretty much why I put it here. And finally, I've got A New Kind of Horror by Anal Nathrak. This is a really fantastic album as well, but it's also kind of got a unique style to it, kind of combining black metal, death metal, industrial metal, all these different forms of extreme metal and stuff like that, and kind of melding it into this one thing. And it's really, really cool. I really enjoy these guys' sound, and I really enjoyed the album as a whole. Next up, I've got the albums that I think had the best feeling and atmosphere to them. Albums that I think had a really good feel to them, and that is an important thing to me when I listen to an album, you know, albums that have a particular feeling to them, I guess. First up, I've got, again, Architects with Holy Hell. Again, this is a really good album, and it just overall has a really good feeling to it. You know, the entire album just kind of flows really nicely together. It's not really a particularly atmospheric album or anything like that, although it does have a couple songs where it kind of leans that way a little bit. But overall, just the way this album feels to listen to and all of that kind of stuff is just really strong, I think. Next, I've got Transients by Shiel Magognar, again, appearing on here. This one is, of course, a bit of a more atmospheric album, and overall it was really, really good, and I enjoyed it a lot. And again, overall, it's just got a really good feeling to it throughout the album. And finally, again, I've got A New Kind of Horror by Anal Nathrak. It's just very different from both of those albums, the Architects and Shiel Magognar albums, because the feeling of this album is very chaotic and very apocalyptic. The band has been described before as being the sound of the apocalypse, which is kind of a very good description of them. And I really enjoyed that about this album and about the band as a whole. Just the way that it feels in terms of that, it just feels very chaotic, very aggressive, and I just really enjoyed that. Getting close to the end here, I've got the best underground or up-and-coming artist or album that came out this year from an underground or up-and-coming artist, basically. Albums that maybe won't get super well recognized or anything like that I think were really good. And of course, first up, I've got The Alliance by Sypcore. Again, really fantastic album, not a super well-known band. They've released 4 albums, but they're not, like, really that well known outside of Germany, and even in Germany they're not super well known, so I definitely think this is a band that is definitely very underrated. Next, I've got The Misanthrope by Abysmal Torment, which, again, they've released 4 albums, but they're still not particularly well known. But they're a really fantastic death metal band. If you enjoy death metal, you'll probably enjoy this album. They're really, really fantastic, and again, not very well known. but definitely should be if you ask me. And third one I've got here is the self-titled album from Follow the Cypher, and this is actually their debut album as well. They're kind of a female-fronted power metal band, and they're really good as well. Of course, with this being their debut album, they're probably not going to be super well known for a little bit, but they are really good, and I enjoyed the album a lot. Hopefully they'll get a little more recognition touring with bands like Sabaton, for example. I think they've been on like the Sabaton Cruise and Sabaton Open Air or something like that, and hopefully they'll get a more recognition just based on that. And finally, this one doesn't really have much to do with the music. It's just something I like to do, and that is the best album artwork, because I'm a big fan of album artwork. I think it's a really important thing to have good album artwork, so I'm going to be talking about the albums that I think have the best album artwork. First up, I've got Ember by Breaking Benjamin. Overall, the album is really good, but I really enjoy the artwork on it as well. It's very visually appealing, looks really cool. It's just overall a really cool album cover. The second one I've got is The Burning Cold by Omnium Gatherum. This is a really cool album cover. I really enjoy it a lot. It looks really cool. I think it fits the album pretty well, and overall it's just a really nice piece of album artwork. And finally, I've got Northern Chaos Gods by Immortal, which I didn't really talk about at all in this video, but this is a really fantastic album, a great black metal album, and the return of, in my opinion, one of, if not the best black metal band out there. And the album artwork for this is really cool. I really enjoy it a lot. It's very reminiscent of their last album, All Shall Fall, which had kind of a similar kind of emblem on it, I guess, which I'm assuming the band is going to be using in the future. And I really enjoy the artwork on this album. It's minimalistic in a way because it only uses black and white, and it's not a very complex album cover. It doesn't have a whole lot going on in it, but it looks really good. So that's about it for this video. I apologize if it's a little bit overly long. As of right now, I've been recording for about 35 minutes. So, yeah, I apologize if it was a little bit long or anything. But I wanted to do something like this, so I did. And let me know what you guys think, if you agree or disagree with any of my choices for these, or anything at all like that. Like I said, next week, or at some point in the near future, I will be talking about a whole bunch of albums that came out this year, not necessarily in a top 10 or top 15 kind of order. But for now, this is part 1 of my favorite albums of the year. Thanks for watching, and let me know again what you think in the comments below, and all of that, and that is pretty much it for this video, so I will see you guys next time.